My late husband always warned me never to enter his garage. I remember the first time I saw the garage. It was on the very first day I moved in with Mark back in 1991. We weren't even married yet, just newly engaged, the kind of giddy, nervous, endlessly hopeful people who thought love alone could patch over any cracks in life. The house was modest but charming. A white Cape Cod style tucked into a sleepy Connecticut suburb, surrounded by tall maples and quiet neighbors. The garage was detached, set slightly back from the main house. I asked casually if we could keep some boxes in there. Mark didn't yell or even look angry, but his voice changed. It tightened. "No," he said, his jaw ticking just slightly. "That space is mine. Just don't go in there, okay?" I chuckled nervously. Okay. Possessive much? He kissed my forehead and muttered, "You'll thank me later." I didn't think about it much after that. It was just one of those little quirks you learn to live with in marriage, like how he always folded the dish towels a certain way or refused to let anyone else fill his coffee mug. In the early years it was almost charming. He'd disappear into the garage for hours on weekends, re-emerging with grease on his hands or wood shavings in his hair. And when I asked what he was doing, he'd just say, "Projects." As time passed, I stopped asking. Mark died on a Thursday afternoon, in the passenger seat of his friend's truck, heading back from a fishing trip. A heart attack, sudden and massive. He was 63. I was 57. Just like that, the anchor of my life was gone, leaving me adrift in a house that now felt far too quiet. The grief was a fog. Not the kind you cry through loudly, but the kind that clings to your skin. Followed me everywhere. The nights were the worst, long and empty, the side of the bed next to me cold and untouched. I didn't even consider selling the house for the first year. How could I? Every corner still smelled like him. His slippers still sat beneath the armchair. His razor still on the bathroom sink. The idea of packing any of it away felt like betrayal. But time, stubborn as it is, marched forward. 2 years later, I was standing in front of a realtor, nodding slowly as she explained that the housing market was good, and the neighborhood desirable. "We can list it as is," she said. "But buyers are going to want to see the garage." I hesitated. About that. I'd never opened it, not once, not even after his death. I didn't even know where the key was. I think part of me still felt like I was violating something sacred. Mark had always been so adamant. "Don't go in there." Why? What could possibly justify 2 decades of secrecy? Still, I didn't resist fate when it came. I found the key in his old tackle box, buried beneath a tangle of fishing lures and rusted pocket knives. It was attached to a small brass tag that simply read, "Garage." Felt heavier than a key should. That morning was overcast. I remember that distinctly, as if the clouds themselves were holding their breath. I walked across the gravel driveway, key in hand, heart thudding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I paused before the door, half expecting some spectral force to stop me. But nothing happened. Just the wind and the creak of the old hinges as I pushed the key into the lock and turned. Click. The door groaned open. And I froze. It wasn't what I expected. Not a man cave. Not a workshop. Not a storage space cluttered with forgotten tools and half-built furniture. The walls were lined with bookshelves, floor to ceiling, each one meticulously organized and labeled. History, botany, Civil War documents, psychology. There were hundreds, maybe thousands of books. Leather-bound, antique, pristine. But that wasn't what stopped me. It was the photographs. Dozens of them, pinned carefully across a corkboard wall. Black and white snapshots, faded Polaroids, even a few modern prints. All of them of women. Not celebrities or models. Just women. Some smiling. Some walking in parks. Others standing in front of houses or sitting in cafes. My breath caught as I stepped closer. There were notes below each photo. Names. Dates. Sometimes locations. I staggered backward, suddenly chilled despite the summer air. My eyes darted to the workbench beneath the photographs. There were maps. Red strings connecting places across Connecticut and neighboring states. Beneath it, folders, one for each name neatly labeled with printouts of social media pages, newspaper clippings, even receipts and notes. It was the kind of thing you see in detective thrillers, or horror films, or true crime documentaries. I couldn't move. My body just wouldn't respond. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't stop staring at the last photo, because I recognized her. Sarah Nolan. She was a woman I'd met at a church potluck years ago. Mark had been there. He'd spoken to her. Friendly. Casual. Except now her photo was here. Pinned beside it was a small note. Gone quiet. Should have stopped sooner. My knees gave out. The next few hours were a blur. I remember sitting on the floor, my back against the garage wall, trying to piece together a reality that was fracturing by the second. I found a lockbox beneath the workbench, and inside were old tapes. Cassette recordings, each labeled with initials and dates. I couldn't bring myself to listen to them, not then. Instead, I stumbled back into the house, locked the door, and called my son. "Mom," he said, instantly worried by the tremor in my voice. "Are you okay?" "No," I whispered. "No, I don't think I am." That night I couldn't sleep. The image of that wall of photographs haunted me, pulsing behind my eyelids every time I shut them. I kept replaying the last 30 years of my life. Had I missed something? Had there been signs? Mark was a private man, yes, but he was kind, generous. He built toys for the neighbor kids, volunteered at the local shelter. He was a good man, wasn't he? And yet, what I saw in that garage told another story. A darker one. One I wasn't ready to admit to anyone. Not even myself. But I couldn't run from it. Over the following days, I began going through everything more carefully. I cataloged the photos. I read the files. And as I pieced the fragments together, a horrifying picture began to emerge. Mark had been watching these women for years, decades, not hurting them as far as I could tell, though the truth of that remained unclear, but surveilling them, documenting them, obsessing over their lives, their routines, their likes, their fears. Some entries were innocuous. Others were deeply disturbing. One note read, "Knows I'm watching. Locked doors now. Smart." Another, "Moved. Lost her." I wanted to throw up. This wasn't a secret hobby. This was an obsession, a compulsion, maybe something darker. And I had slept beside it for 32 years. The weight of the discovery didn't settle all at once. It came in waves, first the panic, then the denial, then a strange hollow numbness that left me staring at the walls of his house as if they were strangers to me. I walked through the rooms like a guest at a crime scene. Even mundane objects began to feel tainted. The coffee mug he used every morning. His slippers. The coat he always left hanging by the door. I touched them like they might burn me. But the garage called to me, no longer forbidden. Now it was a wound I couldn't stop probing. On the fourth day I went back inside. I brought gloves, a notepad, and the old tape recorder from our attic, because I couldn't find anything modern enough to play the cassettes he'd stored. The lockbox had at least 20, each labeled in Mark's neat, engineer-like handwriting. I chose one at random. March 1998. I held it in my palm for a long moment before sliding it in and pressing play. First static. Then, a woman's voice. "I don't know why I'm even doing this. You said it'd help, but I don't see how talking to a stranger with a microphone fixes anything." A pause. Then a man's voice. Mark's voice. "Just start with how you've been feeling." Something in my chest clenched. The woman sighed. Anxious. Like someone's watching me. All the time. I stopped the tape. My hands were shaking. I rewound it just to be sure. Played it again. Same voices. Same words. But this wasn't some stranger off the street. This wasn't therapy. This was evidence. I listened to more over the next 2 days. Some were women crying. Some talking casually, nervously, clearly not knowing why they were being recorded. A few mentioned Mark by name. One I'll never forget asked, "Why did you lie about your name?" I realized then that my husband had used aliases. He'd presented himself as a counselor, a social worker, even once in a tape labeled Cell 2002, as a professor researching trauma survivors. That tape ended with a scream. I called the police. What else could I do? A young officer named Bennett showed up first, his eyes widening when he stepped into the garage. He radioed for backup immediately. Within an hour, there were forensic units on our property. Yellow tape. Neighbors peeking through curtains. Reporters would come later. I didn't care. Let them come. Let them see. They asked me questions, so many questions. When did I first notice something strange? Had he ever acted violent? Did I recognize any of the women? I told them the truth. No, and yes, Sarah Nolan. They took everything. The photos. The folders. The tapes. They even dug up part of the backyard. I didn't ask why. And for a while that was it. But the story didn't end there. Not for me. The police couldn't identify all the women. Some files were incomplete. Some photos had only nicknames or initials. They asked me if I could help. I didn't want to, but I had to. Guilt wrapped itself around my ribs like a vice. So I sat with Officer Bennett night after night, going through the names, the faces, the timelines, trying to reconstruct my husband's second life. We matched a few to missing persons reports. One, Tracy Caldwell, had vanished in 2004. Her case had gone cold. Now it was reopened. I don't know how to describe the feeling of realizing your husband might have been involved in someone's disappearance. Shock is too mild. Horror doesn't cover the layers. It was like waking up and finding your life had been a movie. Only you were the only one who didn't know it was a thriller. A month later I received a letter. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in bold black ink. Inside, a single sentence. He watched me for 2 years. I'm still alive. I hope you are too. No name. No contact information. Just that. I showed it to Officer Bennett. He looked grim. You think she's one of them? I asked. He nodded. Almost definitely. And if she knows your address, she may have known him pretty well. That shook me more than I expected. Because whoever she was, she had survived something. Something I hadn't even known was happening in my own home. I didn't sleep that night. They found something buried in the crawl space under the garage 3 weeks later. I wasn't told what at first, just that it was evidence. But the way the lead detective looked at me, with a strange mix of pity and suspicion, made my blood run cold. Later, unofficially, I found out a lockbox. Inside, a ring, a baby shoe, and a Polaroid of a woman lying in what appeared to be a shallow grave, unconscious or worse. No date. No name. I locked myself in the bathroom and threw up for 20 minutes. Was he a killer? Was I married to a killer? The questions clawed at my insides. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors stopped waving. I couldn't blame them. In their eyes, I was the woman who'd lived with a predator for 3 decades and hadn't noticed. Maybe they thought I was complicit. Maybe they thought I was stupid. The truth was worse. I had loved him. The man who made me breakfast on Sundays. Who held my hand in church. Who rubbed my feet when they ached from standing too long in the kitchen. That man didn't exist. Or maybe he did, and the monster lived right beside him, hidden in plain sight. Either way, I would never trust my own judgment again. One night, I poured myself a glass of wine, my first in months, and opened a box of old letters Mark had written me in our early years. Love notes, anniversary cards, birthday scribbles. One stuck out. It was on hotel stationery from a work trip in 1999. I unfolded it, expecting something mundane. Instead I read, "There are parts of me even I don't understand. Thank you for loving me anyway." I stared at that sentence for hours. It felt like a confession hidden inside an apology, or a warning I'd never understood. I burned the letter in the sink. I could have sold the house then, but something stopped me. I felt like I needed to witness what he had done, face it head on, maybe even make peace with it. So I stayed. I rebuilt slowly, changed the locks, painted the garage, had the photos and names turned over to a private group that helps identify missing persons. I even met with 2 women who'd come forward after hearing about the case. One of them, Jenna, had met Mark at a grief counseling group in 2007. He'd pretended to be a counselor in training. She said he never touched her, never hurt her, but the fear of being watched had ruined her for years. She never told anyone until now. "I'm sorry," I told her, tears spilling down my cheeks. "I didn't know." She looked at me with such sadness. Neither did I. 1 year after the discovery, I opened the last box the police had returned. Inside, a journal. His. The entries were sporadic, messy, difficult to read. Some described mundane things, lawn care, oil changes, recipes. But others. "She saw me again today. I need to be more careful. I'm losing control." The thoughts keep coming. Watched her through the blinds. Felt calm again. I closed the book, shaking. Then I picked up a pen, and I began to write my own story. Writing helped. It didn't make the nightmares stop, or silence the voice in my head that kept whispering, "How could you not know?" But it gave me something to hold on to, some thread of reality that was mine again. Because my life for so long had been entangled in his secrets, in the quiet terror he wove behind the walls of our home. Now, writing was my way of reclaiming space. Every morning, I'd sit by the front window with a notebook and a cup of tea. I'd scribble down memories, honest ones. Not the airbrushed kind we use at funerals, but the real ones. The times he snapped too hard at the waitress, or stayed out all night on a work trip, but came home with no luggage. I started listing things I once ignored, brushing them off as stress or man stuff, or just how he is. I wrote until my hand cramped. And when I couldn't write anymore, I read the case files. The investigation into Mark's activities had become a quiet storm. Not loud or public, no viral news pieces, no Dateline specials, at least not yet. But it was growing. The lead detective told me there were now 11 women officially linked to Mark's files, most of them unaware they'd ever been watched. 3 were missing. One had been confirmed dead, Sarah Nolan. That name split me in half every time I heard it. She was kind, quiet, a little reserved. I'd met her only once at a potluck, but I remembered how she'd laughed when Mark complimented her pie. She'd gone missing 6 months later. He told me it was a sad coincidence, and I'd believed him. I kept thinking about the woman who wrote me that anonymous note, the one who said she'd been watched for 2 years and survived. Sometimes I wondered if she hated me, if she thought I helped him somehow. Maybe she saw me as the woman who enabled it all, who made the monster feel normal by putting dinner on the table every night. I couldn't blame her if she did, but a part of me desperately wanted to know her story. One day a second note arrived. This time it was shorter. "He told me about you. He said you were the only one who made him feel human." I had to sit down. I read it again, then again. It was like someone had sucker punched me through the mail. He talked about me? To her? The police traced the note's envelope to a local print shop. It had been mailed from downtown Hartford, but paid for in cash. No cameras nearby. No prints. Whoever she was, she didn't want to be found. But she knew me. And that terrified me. For the first time since opening the garage, I began locking all the doors, double-checking windows, leaving lights on overnight. I hated the feeling. Hated the idea that I was now living in the kind of fear he had caused in others. I didn't want to believe that someone he'd stalked might now be watching me. But fear doesn't ask permission, just settles in your bones. A few weeks later, I got a phone call from Officer Bennett. "We've identified another woman," he said, his voice low. "One of the missing." I swallowed. "Which one?" Her name was Melissa Ray. "We cross-referenced some bank records with the receipts in your husband's files. We think she may have met him at a photography class in 2008. She disappeared in early 2009. Did you find her?" A long pause. "We found where she went missing. We also found tire tracks on archive satellite photos. And a necklace. Her mother ID'd it. But the body hasn't been recovered." I closed my eyes. Another one. Another life gone. And this time her last known moments might have been spent talking to the man I loved. I wanted to scream. But instead I whispered, "Tell her mother I'm sorry. They say grief comes in stages, but they never tell you how grief for someone you thought you knew bends the rules entirely. It's like grieving two people at once, one who loved you and one who destroyed others. One is real. The other is also real. You end up asking yourself impossible questions. Was he pretending when he held me? Was he happy because of me? Or because of what he did when I wasn't looking? Was I just the perfect cover? I thought I was his wife. Was I really just his alibi?" Eventually the media did come. It started with a blog. Someone on Reddit dug up police chatter, connected the dots to old missing persons cases, and suddenly reporters were knocking on my door. Some were gentle. Some were not. One woman shoved a microphone at me and asked, "Did you ever suspect he was a monster?" I shut the door on her and cried in the hallway for an hour. They called him the Watchman online, posted grainy photos of our house, our car, even old Facebook pictures of us smiling at family barbecues. I deleted every account I had. I didn't want to see myself next to that name. But something strange happened too. Women started writing me. Quietly. Privately. First it was just 2. Then 5. Then dozens. Some said, "He followed me once." Others said, "I always felt watched but never knew by who." One simply wrote, "Thank you for telling the truth." I printed every message, hung them on the clean walls of the garage, replaced his photos with their voices. It became a sort of memorial, an altar of resistance. I couldn't undo what he did, but I could make sure his legacy didn't end in silence. I could amplify the people he tried to erase. I lit candles every night for the missing ones. I still do. One evening, a car pulled up across the street. I watched from the window, an old habit now. A woman stepped out. She had short hair, dark jeans, a messenger bag. I didn't recognize her. She didn't knock. Just placed a small envelope at my front step and drove away. Inside was a photo. Me and Mark. Sitting on a bench in 2003. Laughing at something unseen. Behind us, blurry but unmistakable, was the same woman, standing just a few feet away, watching us. And on the back of the photo, one line written in familiar, spiky handwriting. He wasn't the only one watching. The photograph haunted me. I carried it to the kitchen, laid it under the bright light like a relic, and stared at it until my eyes burned. The scene was familiar. The park near our old house, the red bench where we used to sit every Thursday after grocery shopping. I remembered that day. Mark had brought iced coffee and made some ridiculous joke about a squirrel stealing someone's bagel. We laughed so hard we cried. But there she was, just over Mark's shoulder. Sunglasses. Tense posture. Her face half-shadowed, yet unmistakably the same woman who had dropped off the letter. The survivor, the watcher, changed everything. She wasn't just one of his victims. She had been watching him back. I took the photo to Officer Bennett the next morning. He was visibly unsettled. "She was there that day?" he asked, turning the photo around in his hands. "She must have been following him." Bennett nodded slowly. "This woman may be the key to understanding what he did, and maybe why." I wanted to ask, why would she watch us for years and say nothing? Why appear now? But I already knew part of the answer. She wasn't trying to expose him. She was trying to expose me. Weeks passed. I returned to a version of life that resembled normal only if you didn't look too closely. I went to the grocery store. I raked leaves. I baked for the neighbors even though they barely made eye contact anymore. Every night I checked my locks twice, stared into the black window panes, and wondered who might be watching. And then just as suddenly as before she came again. This time she rang the doorbell. I nearly dropped my tea. Through the peephole, short brown hair. Leather boots. That same messenger bag. She stood with eerie calm like she knew I'd open the door. And I did. She didn't speak at first. We stared at each other for a long, weighty moment. Finally she said, "You have questions?" I nodded. She walked past me without waiting for an invitation. She knew the house. Of course she did. We sat across from each other at the dining room table, me clutching a mug, her perfectly still. Her eyes scanned the room like someone mentally cataloging every object. "I followed him for 4 years," she said, voice soft. "From 2005 to 2009. I documented, I tried to collect enough to go to the police. But nothing ever stuck. No hard evidence. No assaults. Just patterns. Just fear. Why didn't you go to the authorities anyway?" I asked. She looked up. Because I knew how good he was at hiding. And I knew how much people liked him. They wouldn't believe me. I swallowed. "He told me about you." Her face twitched. "He said there was a woman who kept showing up. Who stared too long. He thought maybe she was unstable." A long silence. "I was unstable," she said. "Because of him." Her name was Lena. She met Mark when she was 25. Lonely, grieving her mother, trying to rebuild her life after an abusive relationship. He introduced himself at a library talk about resilience after trauma. Said he was researching a book. He was charming, patient, professional, until he wasn't. He started asking questions, she said. Personal ones. About how I slept if I felt safe. I thought he was just thorough. Then I noticed things. My apartment door slightly ajar. The same car parked near my building. My cat missing for a day, then returned like nothing happened. Did he? She shook her head. No. He never touched me. Never broke in. Never left a mark. That was the worst part. He made me question my own sanity. She started watching him back. Learning his patterns. She saw him enter other women's homes. Take photos from a distance. Sometimes leave small items on their porches. An earring, a flower, a book. Little calling cards, she said. Things he could later say he found or borrowed. I felt sick. What stopped you from confronting him? Lena hesitated. Then quietly. You. I blinked. You were always there. Laughing. Holding his hand. Kissing his cheek. I kept telling myself, she would know. She must know. But you never flinched. You never looked scared. I covered my mouth with my hands. I thought maybe you were helping him, she added. Or maybe you were just like me. Trapped. That word trapped sat heavy between us. Why come forward now? I asked. Lena took a breath. Because I thought he might come back. After Sarah. After Melissa. I thought he'd go quiet. But then I saw the news. He was dead. I couldn't believe it. I came here to make sure it was true. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, toward the garage. You're not the woman I thought you were, she said, standing. And I'm sorry for what he did to your life. I wanted to say more. Ask her to stay. Ask her how she survived it, and what she did with all the rage afterward. But she was already walking to the door. Before she left, she turned back and handed me a small flash drive. I recorded him, she said. Not all of it. But enough. And then she was gone. I stared at the flash drive in my palm for a long time. It felt too small to hold something that could destroy me again. But I plugged it in. The folders were neatly labeled: 2006 Park, 2007 Grocery Lot, 2008 Blue House Woman, and so on. Inside each grainy videos, still shots, audio files, all meticulously named, time-stamped. Lena hadn't been exaggerating. She had documented everything. I opened the first folder. The videos were dark. Most were shot from a distance behind fences through car windows. I watched Mark follow a woman through a Target parking lot, wait until she got into her car, then drive off without ever approaching her. In another, he stood outside a gym at dusk, camera trained on a young woman walking out, earbuds in. He didn't move. He just watched, like he was studying an animal in the wild. Then the folder marked 2009, Wife plus Me. My breath caught. I clicked. The first video was at the same park from the photograph. Mark and I sitting on the bench. Behind us, Lena, clearly filming from a hidden spot behind a tree. I could hear her voice barely above a whisper. He smiles differently with her. Softer. But it's still him. The next video, our driveway. I was getting groceries from the trunk. Mark came out and wrapped his arms around me from behind. From off-screen, Lena whispered, "She doesn't know. God, she doesn't know." It felt like watching a stranger's life. But it was mine. And he was the stranger. Then the final folder. Confession under Radio 2010. I clicked it before I could think better. It was a single audio file, 36 minutes long. It started with a click of static, then his voice. Calm. Smooth. Chilling. "If you're hearing this, I guess I'm either dead or gone. So congratulations, Lena. You won. But I want to be clear about one thing. You didn't understand me. Not really. None of you did. You all thought I wanted control. Or fear. But it wasn't that. I felt the hairs rise on my arms. It was about order. The beauty of patterns. Routines. Predictability. I chose women who fit the script. Kind. Alone. Searching. Like Lena. Like Sarah. Like Melissa. Like. He paused. Like my wife. My stomach twisted. She was the only one I couldn't predict. The only one who didn't fit the model. That's why I married her. I thought if I kept her close, I'd figure it out. Solve the equation. My hand trembled on the mouse. But she disappointed me. Eventually, they all do. He chuckled. A sound I had heard 1,000 times, but here it curdled. She never went in the garage. Not once. I left hints. Made it obvious. Left the light on. A door cracked. She never asked questions. Part of me wanted her to find out. Part of me wanted her to stop me. Silence. Then. But she didn't. She never did. I stopped the recording. I couldn't breathe. He wanted me to find him out. Or maybe he wanted to punish me for not doing so. The thought pierced me like ice through the chest. I sat there for hours unmoving, the cursor blinking over the paused waveform like a heartbeat in limbo. Eventually, I gave the flash drive to the police. Lena agreed to speak on record finally, and her recordings filled in the last gaps of the case. The evidence was damning enough to reopen several cold files. Families were contacted. One woman, missing for over 12 years, was confirmed via DNA from an old scarf found in the garage freezer, long overlooked. That scarf belonged to Emily Hayes, age 29. She disappeared in 2011. Mark and I celebrated our anniversary that year with champagne and fireworks. I remember him kissing my cheek and whispering, "You make me feel safe." He must have meant, "You make me invisible." After the investigation wrapped, I sold the house. I didn't even pack most of it. Just what mattered: photos of my parents, my journals, the few belongings that felt untainted. The garage was demolished by the new buyers. I didn't cry. I moved 2 states over. Started using my maiden name again. Quiet place, small house, neighbor's dog that barks too much. It's not much, but it's honest. No secrets. I work part-time at a bookstore. It's enough. One afternoon Lena showed up again. This time I smiled when I saw her. We went to lunch. Talked like old acquaintances who had survived the same war. At one point I asked, "Do you ever feel guilty?" She didn't flinch. "All the time," she said. "But not for what I did. For what I didn't do." I nodded. "Me too." Before we left, she handed me a small envelope. I didn't open it until I was home. Inside was a photo. A group of women. 7 of them. Holding hands. Some smiling, some solemn. A quiet strength radiating from them. On the back, a note in Lena's handwriting. "We survived. You belong here too." That photo now sits on my nightstand. Every night before I sleep, I look at their faces. Some I know. Some I've never met. But we're connected now by fear, by survival, by a man who thought he could erase us. He failed. We remember. And we speak. Because silence is where people like him thrive. And I will never be silent again.